Size decides everything. Or does it? If bigger always wins, why do combat sports need weight classes? Why do 150-pound athletes sometimes beat 200-pound opponents? And why does the rulebook ban actions that become extra dangerous when size gaps exist? This is not a tutorial. This is about what happens when different sized bodies collide. The biology behind the rules. The physics behind the ethics. Size matters, but not in the simple big beats small way people imagine. Biology, physics, rules, and psychology all crash together when a smaller body meets a bigger body. We'll explain how size changes force and energy use, why some body parts need extra protection when size gaps exist, and why responsibility grows with power. And there's one thing tiny joints can do that massive muscles can't. That's why most combat sports ban small joint attacks. Not because they're fake, because they break too fast. Physics of size mismatch. Mass and momentum. More mass usually means more impact force and more resistance to being moved. That's basic physics. Think of cars. A small car versus an 18-wheeler. If both move at the same speed, the truck carries more momentum. It also takes more force to stop it. But here's the twist. Force does not scale evenly. When mass doubles, impact force can jump a lot more than double. Why? Bigger bodies often have longer levers, arms and legs, and more muscle working together. That can create more speed and more snap. A 200-pound athlete moving at the same speed as a 150-pound athlete has about 33% more mass. But the real danger is what happens after contact. When more mass crashes into less mass, energy does not spread out fairly. The smaller body can take a larger share of stress compared to its structure. That's where injuries can happen. Not because big is evil, but because bones, cartilage, and tendons have limits. Reach and timing tell another story. Longer reach changes the space between two people. A bigger athlete can touch you while staying outside your range. But reach has a cost. Longer limbs can take a bit more time to speed up and slow down. That's why timing matters so much in sport. A smaller athlete with sharp timing can sometimes slip into a gap when the bigger athlete is resetting. Energy cost is the hidden weakness. Moving more body mass costs more fuel. Think motorcycle versus semi-truck. The truck can pull more, but it burns more gas doing it. Ground forces scale with body weight too. Every step, every jump, every quick stop, every hard turn puts more load into joints and tissue in bigger bodies. Power has benefits, but power also has bills to pay. What's happening inside both bodies? Muscle and leverage decide how force gets used. Bigger frames often have more muscle, but more muscle does not guarantee better control. Coordination and skill still matter. Big muscles have more fibers to turn on. That can mean more power, but it also means higher fuel use. Your body must feed those fibers with oxygen and energy. Here's the part most people miss. Tissues have limits no matter your size. Cartilage wears down with heavy loading. Ligaments can stretch past the point of return. Bones can crack when force is too high. Being big does not make you unbreakable. In fact, force can grow faster than durability. A bigger athlete may be able to produce huge force, but their own body must also handle that force. That means bigger athletes can get hurt from their own power too. Now look at the fuel tanks. Your body has fast fuel for short bursts, mid fuel for hard effort, and slow fuel for long work. Bigger bodies tend to drain all three faster because they move more mass and run more muscle. Heat is another factor. Bigger bodies can make more heat during hard effort. Cooling that heat takes work. If heat climbs, performance can drop. Adrenaline changes things for both sides. Big athletes may feel unstoppable and spend fuel too early. Smaller athletes may panic and waste fuel with stiff, jerky movement. Biology does not reward size alone. It rewards efficiency. Stress response under chaos. When a fight starts, both bodies run the same alarm system. Heart rate jumps, blood pressure rises, breathing gets fast and shallow, fine hand control gets worse, tunnel vision can show up, decision-making can get sloppy. Under big stress, your body cares more about survival than about perfect choices. Time can feel weird, your focus can narrow. That's normal human biology. Stress can push bigger athletes into overconfidence. Their body chemistry says, you should win. That can lead to rushing, bad pacing, and sloppy choices. Stress can push smaller athletes into fear mode. That can lead to panic choices or freezing. Stress also hurts reaction time, and size can add a small delay because signals travel farther in bigger limbs. Under stress, small delays can feel bigger. That's one reason why calm matters so much in sport. Blood flow also shifts under stress. Your body sends more blood to big muscles and less to small muscles. Hands and feet can feel clumsy. This can happen to anyone, but bigger bodies must move blood through more tissue, so fatigue can feel heavier. Sometimes the calmer athlete wins. Not because they are bigger, not because they are stronger, but because they are not fighting their own nervous system. when size becomes liability. Force does not distribute equally. When a bigger body hits a smaller body, the smaller body can absorb more stress than it can safely handle. But bigger bodies face unique risks too. If you can create more force, you can also overload your own joints and tissue. Self-injury becomes more likely when power is high and control is low. Injury risk follows brutal math. Small increases in force can create big jumps in injury chance. Here's the idea. A 220-pound athlete might generate around 60% more force than a 150-pound athlete in some actions. But injury risk to the smaller athlete can rise much more than 60% because the smaller body has less room before damage happens. This is why referees stop mismatches early. It's why doctors check fighters between rounds. And it's why some actions are banned even if they work. At a certain point, it stops being sport and starts being medical danger. Recovery time is also different. Bigger bodies often need longer to recover after hard bursts. The heart works harder. Waste products build up faster. That can create short windows where the bigger athlete slows down. Size can be power, but size can also be a liability. Rulebook versus biology. Combat sports ban impacts to certain body regions because damage there can be severe and hard to defend against. Not because they are magic off switches, because the anatomy is vulnerable and the results can be life-changing. Rules are written from injury data. Medical teams study what goes wrong. They look for patterns. They ask, where do we see the worst injuries? Then the rulebook tries to cut that risk down. Now the joint rule that matters a lot with size gaps. Big joints versus small joints. Large joint holds build pressure slower. That gives time to notice danger and give up safely. In sport, that time matters. Small joint attacks can break things fast with very little warning. A finger or toe can get damaged before the brain even understands what happened. That is why many sports ban them. And size gaps make this even riskier. A bigger athlete can apply more force. On a small joint, the force to tissue ratio gets dangerous very quickly. Rules are not there to weaken fighters. They exist to keep force inside survivable limits. Psychology of facing a bigger opponent. Size changes the mind before the first contact. Many people assume the bigger person will win. That belief changes behavior. Stress hormones rise, breathing changes, muscles tighten, timing gets worse. Smaller athletes can become hyper alert. That sounds good, but it can waste energy. Too much scanning, too much flinch, too much tension. Bigger athletes can become careless. Confidence can turn into sloppy choices. They may ignore real threats because I'm bigger. Both sides also feel ego pressure. The big person feels they must dominate. The small person feels they must prove a point. Ego burns fuel and breaks focus. Biology does not care about ego. Myth versus reality. Myth. Size doesn't matter if you know secrets. Reality. Secret tricks are overhyped. Real results come from skill, conditioning, and smart rules, not magic. Myth. Bigger always wins. Reality. With equal skill, size is a big advantage. Upsets happen when skill gaps are huge, when conditioning is very different, or when the bigger athlete makes poor choices. Truth sits in the middle. Size matters because physics matters, but physics is not the only factor. Real-world examples. Here are 3 things fans often notice in fights, and what biology is doing. 1. A big athlete looks scary early, then slows down fast. That can be fuel cost. More mass means more work each second. If the pace stays high, the big engine can burn hot. 2. A smaller athlete gets hit, but stays calm and keeps moving. Calm saves energy. Calm keeps vision wider. Calm protects decision-making. Panic wastes fuel and makes timing worse. 3. A referee stops a fight even when someone wants to continue. That is not soft. It is risk control. When size gaps exist, one extra hit can do much more damage than people expect. If you remember one idea, remember this. Size changes the risk curve. The rules exist to keep that curve from turning into tragedy. Ethics, law, and responsibility. Sanctioned sport has referees, doctors, and rules because biology can be brutal without control. This video is for understanding, not for copying. Knowledge should create responsibility, not temptation. Responsibility scales with capacity. The more force you can produce, the more carefully you must manage it. In real life, law looks at outcomes and reason. Bigger trained people may face more scrutiny because courts understand force differences. The same action can cause very different damage depending on body size. Biology changes consequence, and law follows consequence. Size matters. Physics is real. Biology is real, but so are consequences. The bigger you are, the more force you can create. The more force you can create, the more responsibility you carry. That's why weight classes exist. That's why rules exist. That's why smart fighters learn control before power. Understanding size does not make you dangerous. It makes you disciplined. And discipline is what separates athletes from accidents. Real strength is not just how much force you can generate. It's how much force you can choose not to use. If you want real combat biology, not movie myths, subscribe now. Hit like if this changed how you see size in fighting, and stay sharp.